evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Wynna Wong. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. Hong Kong imposes its toughest measures yet in a bid to roll back the fifth COVID wave. Workers who lost their jobs because of the virus stand to get a handout. And Hong Kong sets another record for new COVID infections. For the first time ever, Hong Kong will limit the number of people gathering in private premises as the city introduces its toughest round of measures yet. The vaccine bubble has also been expanded, and those who break the rules face harsher penalties.
With Hong Kong reporting another day of record infections, the government is tightening its grip in the hope of choking COVID out of the city. Chief Executive Carrie Lam announced that from Thursday, there will be a two-person cap on public gatherings, although families with 3 or more members will be exempt. Type D restaurants will be limited to 4 people per table instead of the current 6, while only groups of 2 or individual patrons will be allowed in types B and C eateries. The vaccine pass has also been expanded to include 6 more places. Most people will have to be vaccinated to enter premises like shopping centers, supermarkets, and wet markets. Salons and religious venues also made the list. Locations in these 2 categories have been ordered to close until February 24th, when the new vaccine pass rules come into force. And for the first time ever, the government is clamping down on gatherings in private premises. No more than 2 families will be allowed to congregate in homes. Caretakers for individual family members will be exempt. Asked how this will be enforced and whether Hong Kongers should expect law enforcement officers to knock on their doors, Permanent Secretary for Food and Health Thomas Chan said authorities will not seek to proactively enforce this rule. But if a person tests positive and contact tracing shows they violated cross-family gathering rules, they will face punishment.
Every measure that we now introduce has been undertaken in another jurisdiction, including some places and countries which are very proud of their human rights, their democracy, and so on. They are doing all these sort of things because this is about life. Public health prevails very often, the individual freedoms.
The fine for rule violation has been increased from $5,000 to $10,000.
The government is launching a series of measures to help industries and workers affected by the fifth COVID wave. A $10,000 handout is proposed for the unemployed, while laws will be amended to protect bosses who sack unvaccinated staff who cannot go to their workplace because of the vaccine bubble. Chloe Feng reports.
Businesses affected by the latest social distancing measures will get some relief. Chief Executive Carrie Lam said there will be a 6th round of anti-epidemic funds worth $26 billion. Sectors that benefited from previous rounds, like the hard-hit tourism industry, will continue to qualify for aid, while some others, like transportation, agriculture, and fishing, will also get help. Those in high-risk jobs, including airport cargo workers, security guards, and cleaners, will get $2,000 each for 5 months. People who lost their jobs because of COVID are in line for a $10,000 cash subsidy. Lam said the allowance is groundbreaking and the government is working on its implementation. The chief executive also plans to amend labor laws. One proposal would allow employers to sack unvaccinated staff who cannot go to their workplace because of the vaccine pass arrangement, which takes effect later this month. Employers will be charged with unreasonable dismissal if they sack workers who are unable to report for duty because of lockdowns or compulsory testing orders. Employees will also be able to qualify for sick leave if they are quarantined. Chloe Feng, HKIBC.
Health authorities have expressed alarm at the rapid surge in COVID cases. They say the city is under its worst attack from a virus. Maisie Mock reports.
New COVID cases in Hong Kong climbed to its highest level today since the crisis began. There were 625 positive infections, only 4 of which were imported. Tomorrow's figures are expected to remain high because there were 500 preliminary positive cases. In the past fortnight, Hong Kong recorded more than 2,600 cases, compared with about 16,000 since the pandemic began more than 2 years ago. About a third of the infections in the past 2 weeks, or nearly 900, were from unknown sources. The head of communicable disease, Chuang Shuk-kwan, said many of the recent cases involved cross-family gatherings. Some gatherings led to the virus spreading in buildings and offices. There were at least 19 large-scale groups, with each cluster consisting of 8 to 47 people. Director of Health Ronald Lam said home quarantine for close contacts and their families began today as the city's public healthcare system is under stress. A total of 38 people were placed in home quarantine and they will receive kits for tests. 80 infected low-risk patients will be sent to Penny's Bay. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
Residents of Fujit House in Sham Shui Po will be locked down for a second night after 22 preliminary positive COVID cases were found. But residents of 2 buildings in Sha Tin were allowed to leave this morning after being sealed off since Sunday night. Here's Maisie Mock again.
Residents of Fujit House in Fuchen Estate were eager to leave this morning after their building in Sham Shui Po was locked down last night. But they were told to stay put for another day after 22 preliminary positive COVID cases were found, raising concerns about transmission risk. The government also noted that sewage discharge from Fujit House tested positive in recent days. In Sha Tin, 2 residential buildings in Mei Tin Estate were unsealed this morning after a 2-night lockdown. Residents criticized the arrangement on Sunday, the first night, saying they were confusing. This man from Mei King House said residents were not told when they could leave. He thought the lockdown would be lifted yesterday, but only found out that it was extended when he went down to the lobby. This man from Mei Chi House said the first night was chaotic, but yesterday was better. Out of the 4,000 tests in Mei Chi House, 15 samples came out preliminary positive. Just over 4,000 people were tested in Mei King House and 13 were preliminary positive. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
Non-emergency operations in government hospitals may be reduced by up to 50% in the next 2 weeks as medical staff are assigned to work in Penny's Bay. Tony Ling, who heads the Public Doctors Association, said in a radio program that medical workers have started to feel physically and mentally tired as their workload has increased because of COVID. He suggested a special allowance for medical staff. Ling added that a triage hotline should be set up to avoid large numbers of people rushing to emergency wards if they find they are positive after a rapid test. Vegetable prices have skyrocketed as supplies dried up because many cross-border truck lorries are stuck in Shenzhen for quarantine. Non-governmental agencies are worried about the effect higher food prices will have on poor households. Chloe Feng reports.
Hong Kong relies heavily on imported food, with over 90% of fresh vegetables coming from the mainland. The vulnerability of the supply chain was exposed during the current Omicron outbreak, as transport and delivery services were disrupted. Like many other supermarkets across the city, this one in Shao Mao Ping saw its shelves quickly emptied as Hong Kongers rushed to stock up food in case of lockdowns. Those who managed to get supplies from street stalls found that prices were almost double. At this store on Pui Ho Street in Sam Shui Po, spinach was selling for more than $30 per caddy. Baby bok choy jumped from $6.60 per caddy to more than $12. Prices soared because demand exceeded supply. Chen Dixao, president of the Container Transport Workers Union, said 5 cross-border lorry drivers who transported vegetables to Hong Kong contracted COVID. About 40 other drivers are quarantined on the mainland because they are regarded as close contacts, leaving fresh produce to rot. When pressed this morning on how the government can secure enough food for residents, Chief Executive Carrie Lam said the answer was to fight the virus together. She said unless the epidemic is contained, everyone will have to pay the consequences. Some non-governmental agencies warned that higher prices will hurt the poor.
There is around 1.65 million people they are living under poverty. Before the grassroots, they cannot afford to buy the meat, and now they even cannot buy the vegetables. So it's very hard for them to afford the free meals. So what they can do is eat less or eat the noodle and the rice.
Government figures show that the supply of fresh vegetables yesterday was only 1/3 of the amount on Sunday. Chloe Fong, HKIBC.
And coming up after the break, there's a flurry of diplomatic activity over the Ukraine crisis. And Morocco bids a sad farewell to a 5-year-old boy who died while trapped in a well.